People thought, well, maybe this is just John the Baptist come back to life. Others thought he was a great prophet like Elijah or Jeremiah from long, long ago. Then Jesus asked his followers who they thought he was. The disciples had seen Jesus powerfully teach large crowds about God and his kingdom. They'd seen Jesus feed 5,000 people at one time with only a few fish and bread till everyone was full. They'd seen Jesus make people who couldn't walk. They'd seen Jesus tell the wind and the waves to stop. And the wind and the waves, they did stop. He even brought dead people back to life. So who is Jesus? Peter turned to Jesus and said, "You are the King God promised would come. You are God's Son." Jesus replied, "No one taught this to you, but God has revealed this to you, Simon Peter." Then Jesus told them what would happen next to him. Soon he'd go to the city of Jerusalem, and he'd be arrested. He'd be beaten and hurt. And eventually Jesus would die on the cross. But he wouldn't stay dead. 3 days later, he'd come back to life again. And Jesus said, all of this must happen. It absolutely has to happen. So when Peter heard this, he cried out and said, "No, nothing like this must ever happen to you." But Jesus looked at Peter and said, "Go away from me. If you try to stop me, you are God's enemy. You care about what people think, but this is God's plan. This is what must happen." Peter just couldn't make sense of God's plan. Why would God send his king to come and die? So you see, Peter got it right at the beginning. He said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus affirmed that and said, "Nobody taught this to you, Peter, but the Spirit of God has revealed this to you." But then, Peter got it badly wrong. How did he get it wrong? Yeah.
He thought that just because Jesus was a king, nothing might could happen to him.
That's right. He thought that because Jesus was a king, that he should not die. He should not, all those things that Jesus described shouldn't happen to him. But Jesus said, this absolutely has to happen. And it had to happen because there was no other way for us to be saved from our sin. There was no other way for Peter to be saved from his sin. There was no other way for anyone in the world to be saved from their sin except Jesus dying on the cross. So you see, Jesus took the punishment that our sin deserves. All sin deserves to be punished. And because God is a just God, he will punish all sins. The question is whether or not you are going to bear the punishment for your sin, or you're going to let Jesus bear the punishment for your sin. And Jesus said, anyone who believes in me will not perish but have eternal life. So if we believe in Jesus, he takes the punishment for our sin, and then he also gives us his righteousness so that we can stand right before God and spend eternity in heaven.
You just said a verse, like, you
John
shall not
3:16.
you
Yes.
shall not perish but live eternal life.
John 3:16.
Yes.
That's right, very good. So that's why Jesus had to die, because there's no other way for us to be saved from our sin, because there's no other way to satisfy God's justice, right? And there is no other person who could take on the sins of the entire world except for Jesus. Yes, because Jesus is God.
Yeah.
That's why he could take on the sins of everyone. All right? Now we're going to break into our small groups, and we're